If you set your goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. James Cameron. So this is, for one, not a two-part quote. In the other quotes we already analyzed, it was usually that there are two parts and the one is more important than the other, and therefore usually you say something, it's not about this, it's about this. But here we have something else. It's basically what happens if. So the first part of the statement is an if statement. If you do this, then this will happen. Obviously, almost all sentences or almost all quotes kind of imply a causation in between those two. Not necessarily will this be causation, but because we cannot be sure that anything ever is a causation. This means if something happens, then the next thing that is caused by this something will definitely happen. This is just something we cannot really do because, example, the turkey gets fat and is like very happy. The next day he gets fat and is like very happy and thinks like, oh yeah, next day will be nice. Third day gets fat and is very happy, and on the fourth day, well, he gets killed because it's Thanksgiving. So this just means that there is a certain amount of risk involved with predicting the future, with trying to predict the future, and it's not really risk, but also uncertainty. Risk is something we kind of know. We know how high the chances are, but nevertheless we choose to do something, for example. But uncertainty is always there, so therefore we just don't know what will happen. Now, when it comes to this, when it comes to James Cameron, this is actually something that kind of makes sense. If you set your goals ridiculously high and it's a failure, you will fail above everyone else's success. Here is what I think, how true this actually is. So, the thing with goal setting is this, that, obviously a goal can be two things. So these are the two extremes of goal setting. It can be either so low that you are like, oh yeah, I can do this at any point in time, so therefore I don't have to do any work for this, or so high that it drives you crazy because you just don't know how to solve it. You just don't know how to solve the problem of getting there. So basically, it's kind of managing your own expectations, but not only managing your own expectations, but also just being realistic what you actually can achieve. But the thing is that being realistic on what you actually can achieve is only one part of the equation. It's only one variable. And another variable we actually have to take a look on and have to take into account is what actually this goal setting process makes or does to our thinking. And when it comes to setting ridiculously high goals, this is something James Cameron obviously uses as the axiom for his kind of conclusion then, is that it just changes our way of thinking. Here's a very easy example. In the beginning of, so I tried to make videos a few months ago, basically, like a few months ago. So basically I had this one channel where I did comedy. And in the beginning I was like, oh yeah, it has to be this perfect video, and then I posted. But once you shift your mindset to something else, so in the beginning you're like, oh yeah, this video, and then you take a look at the video, and then maybe it has a few views or it doesn't. But this is the wrong thinking, because it's perfectionism and it's also depending on these single things. The right mindset, or a mindset that is much more close to actually solving this problem, is this: how many videos can I actually record? So this is not the mindset, but this is one question that leads to the right mindset. And for me, this was, okay, what if? So just doing these what if statements or what if questions and asking yourself what would happen if all these things that prevent you from doing something actually just were gone, makes you actually think differently. Because given this is kind of an assumption that's partially true probably, and it's something somebody else said and I just use it. So there are these two different modes. kind of the relaxation mode where our thinking kind of works better, and then there is the flight or fight mode. And the fight or flight mode is a mode where basically our lower intelligence kind of takes over and kind of has more control. And the other mode is something where we think about the possibilities, where we think about new things. Obviously, you have to match those two in between, or you have to actually be in between those two most of the time. But if you drive yourself more towards the what if, sometimes this can actually help you think differently. And this is what kind of James Cameron means. If you, instead of, for example, saying like, oh yeah, I have like 1 hour, and then you try to do the first one until you are kind of satisfied with the result, and then you maybe try to do the second one. This is one type of thinking. For me, I used, for example, this, not especially this quote, but I used this kind of thinking when I was like, okay, how many videos would I actually have to produce if I wanted to post daily, and I would only have like this day. So, and then I was basically up all night and thought about, oh yeah, and I could just do it like this, and then I would just record it within TikTok, and I just would cut it, and obviously I wouldn't have to record like 60 seconds, but I just could record like 10 seconds, and then I could just tag it on my notebook instead of typing it on my phone, and this just makes you think differently. This is one part of the whole quote equation, if we want to call it equation, but here's something else. So, if this is a diagram, so not really a diagram, but more a graph, a function, and this is the success, and this basically is time, then what happens that usually it's not really success, but it's much more how you think. Also, when it comes to success, but it's kind of difficult to find a proper y-axis here, but let's just say we stick with success. Here's the thing. The higher you set your goals, and also implying that high goal setting also changes kind of you, and therefore you are more likely to actually achieve these higher things. The thing is this, if you now, for example, shoot to the stars, like here, for 10, for example, James Cameron could do something like, okay, in the next, how many movies do I want to make in my lifetime? And he could be like, obviously, it would be nice to have like 5 good movies. The problem is that we cannot really predict how these movies, for example, with James Cameron will turn out. And therefore, what he also could do is he could just say, I just focus more on how, not how well a movie turns out, but much more in how many movies I will do. Because then he just gets better at movie making instead of trying to make this one final product, which also could turn out to be not that good. But that's now, again, something else. So here we have the success axis, and here we have just time. And now everybody else's failure because of the low goals is kind of maybe here, or also your own. And then if you set higher goals, you just kind of think differently, and therefore if you now fail and you think like, oh yeah, so basic example again, James Cameron could be like, I want to do 50 movies in my lifetime. And now if he only makes 45, then he made 45 movies. But if instead he was like, oh yeah, I want to do 5 movies, and he succeeded with the same rate of success, then he obviously only made 4 movies. So kind of using the same numbers, 4 to 5, actually 4.5, because the first one was, I guess, 50 and the other one was 5. So therefore, the same success rate of 95%. Is it 95? It's a good question. I would just... No, it's actually 90%, I think. Let's just double it. So therefore we have 50, we would have 100. And if we have 45, then it's 90. So therefore it's 90%. So if we had the same success rate, then obviously just 10xing your goal makes you produce a lot more movies. Actually, 41 movies more. Obviously, this doesn't really work out this way, but that's just the general idea behind this quote. And that's the end. I hope I could help you understanding the quote you didn't want to understand.